Welcome to another video. This is our final video for the series on the book of Samuel. I hope that you have been following up on this series, and if you haven't, there are the videos out there in the YouTube channel that you're able to see it, and also on the Facebook page in our church at Adventist Fellowship Church. Also, we have a new website, so I'll leave it in the link below, and if you want to check it out, you can go ahead and check it out there with all of the resources that we have. And for those of you members who have not checked out the new website, make sure to check it out and give us some feedback into what may need to be. So go to adventistfellowship.church. You're able to find it in the link below, and also I'll probably put it somewhere right here. But over time, we have come to finish our series on the book of Samuel. So we have 1 Samuel. We have already finished that last time. We explored this tragic story of Saul and how it's important that we reflect on our faults and our need to correct our infirmities, to correct those things in which we are weak, and not be like Saul, who was just shoving them under the carpet, under the rug. So that is the importance. We have also seen the example of Hannah and David pushing forward even among those who were prejudiced against them. And we have also seen the story, the tragic story as well, of the people of Israel who desire a king instead of desiring God. But today I want to kind of finish on a high note. I want to showcase the antidote to pride and prejudice, at least the one that the Bible shows us. And this is to be humble and to help even those who may not be the kindest towards us, or those who may not be our friends. In this case, we see the story that we're going to go over is 2 Samuel chapter 9. So we're going to finish with 2 Samuel chapter 9. Hope that you have your Bible, and if you don't, I'll give you a second so you can have it. And as well, that you are able to take notes. And if you have any questions, please make sure to drop them in the comments. But today we're going to be exploring 2 Samuel chapter 9 and the story of David and Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth, as we'll see, it's a very peculiar character that not only reminds us of ourselves. I want to portray it from two different sides, the side of Mephibosheth and also the side of David. So let us get started with 2 Samuel 9. It says like this, verse 1. And David said, "Is there still anyone left of the house of Saul that I may show him kindness for Jonathan's sake?" Now there was a servant of the house of Saul whose name was Ziba, and they called him to David. And the king said to him, "Are you Ziba?" And he said, "I am your servant." And the king said, "Is there not still someone of the house of Saul, that I may show the kindness of God to him?" Ziba said to the king, "There is still a son of Jonathan. He is crippled in his feet." The king said to him, "Where is he?" And Ziba said to the king, "He is in the house of Machir, the son of Amiel at Lodebar." Then King David sent and brought him from the house of Machir, the son of Amiel at Lodebar. And Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, son of Saul, came to David and fell on his face and paid homage. And David said, "Mephibosheth." And he answered, "Behold, I am your servant." It is interesting here that David is trying to show kindness for the sake of Jonathan. If you go into the book of Samuel, David and Jonathan have a very good relationship. They are friends for life. They make a pact with one another. They protect each other even to death. We see Jonathan dying, but still carrying that love that he had for David, because they were very, very good friends. Something that it's even hard today among males to do, to show that affection, to show that true love that can be had among friends, like David and Jonathan had. And here we have a passage. David is trying to showcase kindness to the house of Saul. He didn't have to do this, but he chose to do this. Now, let us start analyzing the life of Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth, his name even is born out of shame, or the person who comes out of shame. And the reason why is mainly because he was lame. As you see in the text, it says that he was crippled, so his feet were crippled. So he didn't have the most luxurious life. He was not able to do all the things that young men were able to do because he was disabled. He had a disability in this case. But we see in the life of Mephibosheth someone who is not worthy to come back. Essentially, Saul had been trying to kill David for all this time. But David instead looks into who? Looks not into Saul, but looks into the commitment that he had to the house of Saul and the house of Jonathan. It is really interesting to see this example because we truly see how David's heart is being transformed, at least up to this point. There's other stories in the book of 2 Samuel that I encourage you to see to balance out this amazing part of King David and some of the mistakes that he did. And I hope that you're able to do that. We may have a series on that in the future. However, at this point in time, especially in the book of 2 Samuel, here in chapter 9, we see that David is trying to show kindness to someone who was not the descendant or the best person, because Mephibosheth was the son of Jonathan, who was the son of Saul. And the writer, specifically in the book of 2 Samuel, lets us know this because he's trying to make this connection that David was trying to vindicate the house of Saul. He was trying to avenge the mistakes that Saul did. Now, I want to tell a story in order for all of this to make sense. And it was a couple of years ago now, about 10 years ago. I was finishing high school, and of course in high school you have your friends and you also have your people that you may not like so much. There was a specific classmate of mine. His name was Peter. And we were decently friendly towards one another, but while at the same time we had this little competitive edge on one another because of our grades. We were always like, I'm better than you, you're better than me. There was nothing nefarious, but there was that kind of spirit of challenging and seeing like, hey, I got a better grade, or, oh, you got a better grade. So, you had to fight. And he was a little bit better than I was, especially in the subject of literature. I took the literature class. I was pretty decent at it, but I was not the best. So there was one time and we were preparing for an exam. I was very good at math. I even did tutoring sessions and so forth. He did the tutoring sessions for literature. And it was very rare, per se, that we were able to attend each other's session because we had this like rivalry, competitivity, right? And at the time I didn't know that we were all working for the same goal, which was get good grades, and at the time it was more like, I want to be the best and I don't want to admit that I need help. In the example of Mephibosheth, we have somebody who needs help. Not someone who is able, but someone who is unable. Someone who needs to be restored. Someone who cannot restore himself. When I was in high school and I had this exam of literature, it was a difficult exam for me. It was very challenging at the time and I did not know how to approach it. And I was too proud to ask for help. But my friend Peter, he came by and he was able to see that I was struggling. And even though I was not the most favorable towards him, even though I was not the most kind towards him all the time, he looked beyond my mistakes, he looked beyond my pride and prejudice and decided to help me. I share this example because I see in Mephibosheth someone who cannot help himself, someone who is not able to help himself. And in this case, it's not necessarily because of pride or prejudice, but it is also because we see this individual who is not able for himself to go and ask for help. He was living in very separate conditions. He was not living in the palace anymore. The book of Chronicles tells us that the servant took him away to a cottage because of fear, that he was going to be killed since Saul and Jonathan, his father, were killed. But here we have David. David is trying to restore someone who is not able to help himself. He's not only trying to restore, but he's trying to make sure that he feels appreciated. Let's continue reading to see what he does. It says right here, verse 7, "And David said to him, 'Do not fear, for I will show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan, and I will restore to you all the land of Saul your father, and you shall eat at my table always.' And he paid homage and said, 'What is your servant, that you should show regard for a dead dog such as I?' Then the king called Ziba, Saul's servant, and said to him, 'All that belonged to Saul and all his house I have given to your master's grandson. And you and your sons and your servants shall till the land for him and shall bring in the produce, that your master's grandson may have bread to eat. But Mephibosheth, your master's grandson, shall always eat at my table.' Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. Then Ziba said to the king, 'According to all that my lord the king commands to his servant, so will your servant do.' So Mephibosheth ate at David's table, like one of the king's sons. And Mephibosheth had a young son whose name was Micah, and all who lived in Ziba's house became Mephibosheth's servants. So Mephibosheth lived in Jerusalem, for he ate always at the king's table. Now he was lame in both his feet. We see in the story of Mephibosheth the lineage of the enemy from David. Not an enemy that he was seeking for, not an enemy that he was happy to have, but an enemy nonetheless. The lineage of someone who did not deserve to be there because of the treason, because of the pride, because of the prejudice, because of all the mistakes that Saul made and passed into the generations. You see, at this time, the Israelites believed in this idea of retribution theology, or this idea that there has to be a retribution from God or a curse for those who, consult divination, who had and go to a witch like Saul did. So all of these things were a curse to Mephibosheth. That is why the servant left with Mephibosheth when he was a child. Again, this is in the book of Chronicles if you want to check this out. And here we have an example of someone who did have this curse or had been outcast, right? In his own kingdom, right? He is the son of Jonathan. He was getting there to be the king. At some point in time, he was entitled to that. But because of one mistake, he lost it all. Now, it is interesting to see David. David restored all of the privileges to Mephibosheth, showing kindness because of Jonathan. Now I want you to think about someone who was the heir to the throne. Someone who was not only the heir to the throne, a heavenly throne, but also a representative from earth. That is our first father, as the Bible says, Adam. Adam and Eve were kings and queens by any standards. They were to be the priests of this land, of this earth. But because of one mistake, they lost it all. And with that, we did as well. We lost it all. And in losing it all, we did not deserve anything. We were like Mephibosheth, lame. We were not worthy at all. But just like David, and as the Bible tends to compare Jesus and David so often, Jesus decided to give us that place back. He invited us to the palace once again, just by saying, I believe and I trust in you. That's what Jesus did. Jesus did what David did. Jesus brought us back and restored everything, even though we were part of the lineage that decided to be enemies of God. Mephibosheth was part of the lineage that decided to be enemies of David. He was part of the lineage of Saul. And even though he was the enemy, David showed kindness. Now I want you to think about your life. Not only in this passage we see kindness displayed, but we're also able to see a challenge to us. Think about those people in your life who you may have wronged, or they may have wronged you, who you do not want to talk about, who you do not want to talk to anymore. Those people who may have different opinions than you do. Are you able to put your pride and your prejudice aside and invite them into the table, just like David did, just like God did with us? It is not an easy task. I remember when it was this exam, when the literature exam was just about to come, I was really struggling. And because of my pride, I did not want to ask for help. But Peter decided to help me nonetheless. He wanted me to succeed, even though I did not want to accept his help. He ended up tutoring me, and I ended up doing well in the exam. But it was very interesting to me, and that was maybe one of my early experiences, where I saw somebody who I had a clash with. We did not agree on everything. We had different opinions. We were, challengers, classmates who had this rivalry. And all of a sudden, someone who I did not agree with decided to help me. It was one of the things that started to change my view on those people who I may disagree with. We may not agree on everything, but we are all human beings. We are all in need of Jesus, and we are all in need of a helping hand. During this time, especially during COVID or the holidays, we all get that warm feeling, right? Helping others is the right thing. And making sure that we are doing the right thing is what the Bible calls us to do. But in the story of Mephibosheth, we see someone who was not able to help themselves, be helped by someone mightier. In this case, King David. In King David, we see an example of humility. We see an example, at least up to this point, of love, even towards one's own enemies. Think about those people who you do not like. Think about those people who do not agree with you, let it be on religion, let it be on politics, let it be on other trivial things like sports, right? Sometimes we have those rivalries. Are you able to love them? Just like David loved Mephibosheth, just like God loved us. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's necessary. The Bible calls us to humility. The Bible calls us to love those who we even disagree with, those who are our rivals, those who are our enemies. That's what the Bible calls for. It calls for a total transformation of our character so that we may be able to love everyone, not only those who we like. It is not an easy task, but it's a necessary one. I hope that the sermon helps you, especially as the times comes very soon. It's a reality. We're going to live in a very different America than we have right now. After coronavirus, things may change. And of course, we are going to be studying more in the book of Daniel about prophecies and things like that in an upcoming series on Tuesdays. But I want you to think about the future. I want you to think about loving people and being kind to them, even to those who you may not agree with, because that is the antidote to pride and prejudice. Being a helping hand, being humble, and loving others. I hope this sermon helps you. I hope this series entices you to read more about the book of Samuel. And I hope that you're able to see in these stories, not only is the story of Hannah, not only in the stories of David, but also in the other stories that are found in the book of Samuel. The story of Nathan shows us how to rebuke those who have pride and prejudice. This story of Mephibosheth shows us the love that we need to have with others. But there's plenty of other stories. And I invite you that you are able to truly open this book and, seek to understand it more and more. Again, if you have any questions, make sure to let me know in the comments. And if you're for church members, make sure to just ask me a question. Shoot me an email or give me a phone call. I'm always available. Thanks for watching this video, and we'll see you in the next series. I hope that this series helped you understand more about the love of Christ and also about the antidote to pride and prejudice, which is humility and helping others. Thanks for watching.